From actually stealing the World Cup trophy to dropping a deuce on the pitch mid-game, these are the World Cup moments you won't believe actually happen. And first off, whilst getting injured just before the World Cup is every player's nightmare, imagine having your World Cup ruined by a bottle of aftershave. That's what happened to Spanish goalkeeper Santiago Canizares in 2002 at Spain's pre-tournament training base, as the Valencia shotstopper was Spain's #1 at the time after taking his club side to the Champions League final in 2001. But just before Spain were due to fly out to South Korea and Japan for the 2002 World Cup, he had a rare Butterfingers moment and dropped a bottle of cologne on his foot. His clumsiness alone should have convinced his head coach that this guy was not fit for a World Cup place, but unfortunately for Canizares, the bottle smashed on his foot and a piece of glass severed a tendon in his big toe, ending his World Cup, with Iker Casillas taking his place and subsequently becoming the country's established #1. But Canizares can console himself by knowing that at least one of his feet smells good. Now, the balls used in the World Cup are often controversial, from the mad swerves of the unsavable Jabulani ball at South Africa 2010 to the appalling Etrusca Unico at Italia 90. But imagine being so paranoid about the quality of the ball that you brought your own. That's exactly what happened at the 1930 World Cup, as Argentina and Uruguay both brought their own balls, with Argentina's ball coming from Scotland and Uruguay's from England. And that didn't cause any problems at the start of the tournament, although it might have been a factor in their dominant performances as they both battered their opponents. But when Argentina faced Uruguay in the final, something had to give, as both countries demanded to play with their own ball. Luckily, FIFA's president at the time, Gilles Rimet, was rather diplomatic and suggested they play the first half with one ball and the second half with the other. So Argentina used their ball for the first half and were 2-1 ahead at the break, but in the second half, Uruguay's ball was used and Uruguay scored 3 goals, including 1 goal by a player with just one arm, to win the final 4-2. And did the balls make a difference? Well, both sides won all their matches easily until they had to play with a different ball. And there's plenty of mad, crazy stories to come, including a pitch invasion by a sheikh and even a doctor getting a World Cup medal. But let's stick with Uruguay for our next story, which proves that sometimes players do get hungry on the football pitch. Luis Suarez already had a reputation going into the Brazil 2014 World Cup. He'd been banned twice already in his career for biting players, getting a 7-match ban while at Ajax and a 10-game ban for munching on Chelsea's Branislav Ivanovic while playing for Liverpool. So you could probably guess what happens next. Suarez was the hero of the previous match, scoring twice to knock England out of the World Cup, but he quickly went from hero to villain in the 79th minute of the match against Italy when he took a bite out of Giorgio Chiellini. Then Suarez fell over holding his face and pretending that he'd hurt his teeth, which might have been a slightly believable story had he not already chomped his way through several other players during his career. But incredibly, the referee, who had already sent off an Italian player early in the game, somehow missed Suarez's attempt to snack on the Italian defender and then even ignored Chiellini when he showed the referee the bite marks on his shoulder. While Italy were complaining about Suarez's rather unique dietary requirements, Italy conceded a corner, which Uruguay then scored the winning goal from. Unfortunately for Suarez, FIFA had a bit of common sense for once, and they banned him for 9 matches. While Suarez seems unlikely to win any fair play awards, one team actually gamed the fair play rules to reach the next round, and then there's the story of the referee who got duped by an Australian accent. But first, let's go to the 2010 World Cup, where France did what France is best at: going on strike. The French arguably shouldn't have even been in South Africa, having qualified due to a sneaky handball by Thierry Henry in the playoffs against Ireland, and head coach Raymond Domenech's bizarre squad choice for 2010, leaving out Patrick Vieira and Karim Benzema, already had the makings of a disaster, and before their first match, Florent Malouda almost had a fight with Domenech and was benched for the dull, goalless draw against Uruguay. Already, pundits were saying Domenech had lost control of the team, but at halftime in the second match, he had a huge row with Nicolas Anelka and then subbed Anelka for the second half. France lost the game 2-0, but when Anelka was sent home for the tournament, his teammates had had enough. They went on strike, refusing to train, and then hiding in the team bus with the curtains drawn before eventually writing a letter opposing Anelka's exclusion from the squad. The embarrassment from the strike and from finishing bottom of their group in South Africa saw Domenech sacked, and his successor then decided to ban the entire World Cup squad from the next France match. But referees can have performances even worse than France in 2010, as 4 years earlier, English referee Graham Paul had a night to forget. He was in charge of Australia's match against Croatia, which would decide who reached the knockout stages. With so much at stake, the match got a little feisty as players dived in with rough tackles, and Croatia's Josip Šimanić was one of those players as he hacked down Harry Kewell and was shown the yellow card. But Šimanić was fuming, and he protested to Graham Paul, shouting, "You're unbelievable," again and again. But Šimanić was born and raised in Australia, and his thick Aussie accent confused Paul, who mistakenly marked his number down in the Australia column of his notebook. Unfortunately for Paul, keeping track of who had been booked wouldn't get any easier as both sides had a player sent off, and there were penalties and penalty appeals, and with the scores tied at 2-2, Šimanić committed a double foul, pulling down Mark Vidica and then hacking Joshua Kennedy, so he got another yellow card. But for some reason, the referee didn't pull out the expected red card that should have followed it, so Šimanić just kept playing and later committed another bad tackle and was booked again, and this time, finally, Paul did give him the red card. But after giving Šimanić 3 yellow cards in one game, Paul saw his dream of refereeing the World Cup final go up in smoke, and he admitted his mistake and then retired a year later. And daft yellow card rules also helped this next team reach the knockout stages of the World Cup. Group H was probably the toughest group to call at Russia 2018, especially when Japan beat Colombia 2-1 in their opening game. In Japan's second game, they drew 2-2 with Senegal, meaning both sides were tied on 4 points apiece, and they also had both scored and conceded the same number of goals, and neither team had a head-to-head advantage as the game between the two was tied. And so in the final match, Japan were losing 1-0 when, in the other match, Colombia scored to go 1-0 up against Senegal. And that meant that Japan and Senegal had identical records. If the scores remained the same, the group ranking would be decided on fair play, meaning Japan would reach the knockout rounds as they had fewer yellow cards. So, rather than push for an equalizer against Poland and risk a yellow card, Japan played a very safe and conservative final 15 minutes of the game, opting to play for the loss rather than risk a Polish second goal or a flurry of yellows that would have seen them eliminated. While teams in the past have adopted similar unsportsmanlike tactics to ensure the match finishes in a draw, like West Germany and Austria at the 1982 World Cup, nobody has done it to try to qualify through the fair play rule. But Japan's 15 minutes of passing the ball around the defense nearly backfired as Senegal came close to scoring a goal which would have eliminated Japan. But despite being booed by the fans in Volgograd, Japan's gamble paid off as they qualified with 4 yellow cards to Senegal's 6, but they then lost in the knockout rounds to Belgium. If you think that's crazy, wait till you hear why you shouldn't eat Italian food at the World Cup. But before that, did you know that an ophthalmologist in America was once given a World Cup medal? That's because playing for your country at the World Cup is the biggest honor, and any injury ahead of the World Cup can be devastating. Brazilian footballer Tostao was one of the greatest of all time. He was voted in the top 5 Brazilian players of the 20th century and had an incredible striking partnership with the legendary Pelé. But ahead of the 1970 World Cup, while playing for Brazilian side Cruzeiro, a ball struck him in the face and he suffered a detached retina. So, aged just 26, he was told that his career was over. But he didn't give up and instead flew to the USA for emergency surgery to save his eyesight. And despite a successful surgery, he struggled to get used to playing football again and was on the verge of not being allowed to go to the World Cup. But incredibly, he recovered enough to get called up for the World Cup and scored 2 goals in the knockout game against Peru. And so, when Brazil beat Italy 4-1 in the final, Tostao spent the last 20 minutes crying, overwhelmed with emotion as he realized Brazil were about to become World Cup champions. After being presented with the World Cup winner's medal, he actually gave his medal away to the ophthalmologist in Houston who saved his eyesight, and Tostao actually retired a year later and became a doctor himself before later becoming a TV pundit. And there's a famous TV pundit in England who embarrassed himself with some bathroom issues while on the pitch at the World Cup. But first, there's plenty of stories of kings and rulers interfering in domestic sports, but it's almost unbelievable that a member of royalty would actually be able to interfere in a World Cup match. But that's exactly what happened in 1982, when Kuwait became the first Arab nation to qualify for a World Cup. They started well, drawing their first game with Czechoslovakia 1-1 after conceding a penalty scored by Antonin Panenka, who ironically didn't score with a Panenka. But in their second game, everything went wrong for Kuwait as France completely outplayed them and found themselves 3-1 up with 20 minutes to go. When France scored to make it 4-1, Kuwait thought the goal was offside, so Sheikh Fahad Al Ahmed Al Jaber Al Sabah, the head of Kuwait's FA, who's better known as Prince Fahad, told the Kuwait players to walk off the pitch and then came down from the stands and onto the pitch himself to argue with the referee. Prince Fahad, surrounded by his security guards, argued with the referee who, for some reason, gave in to the Kuwaiti Sheikh's pressure and changed his mind, disallowing the goal. While it didn't affect the outcome, as France scored again late on to win 4-1, the referee was banned for life for yielding to such pressure, and Kuwait lost their final game 1-0 and exited the World Cup. The pressure at the World Cup could make many players feel as if they might poo their pants, but one player actually did. There's something about Tottenham Hotspur and Italian food, with food poisoning from lasagna once famously ending their chances of reaching the Champions League. But in 1990, Italian food would also lead to the most embarrassing moment of then Tottenham Hotspur striker Gary Lineker's career. Lineker had been top scorer at the 1986 World Cup and had a dream start to Italy 90 when he scored after just 9 minutes in England's opener against Ireland. But he'd actually been feeling ill before the game, and then, during the match, he started to feel something wrong with his stomach. Midway through the second half, things got worse as he suddenly realized he needed to go to the bathroom right away. And then, when he lunged for the ball, disaster struck as his bowels relaxed and released everything that was inside them. Lineker quickly sat down on the ground, hoping the TV cameras wouldn't spot he had just pooed his pants, and one of his teammates came to ask if he was all right, and he admitted to him what had just happened as he shuffled along the grass trying to remove some of the stool before being substituted off. But his digestive system recovered in time for him to score 3 more goals at the '90 World Cup as he took England to the semi-finals. Rather than try to hide the incident, he's talked about it regularly as a TV pundit. But despite Lineker's best efforts, England couldn't win the World Cup in 1990. But back in 1966, England won and lost the World Cup in the same summer. Ahead of the 1966 World Cup, the Gilles Rimet Trophy was on display at Westminster Central Hall in London, but it was only guarded when the exhibition was open, so at other times, nobody was watching football's most famous trophy. On March 20th, thieves broke in and stole the World Cup trophy, and the next day, the English FA received a ransom note demanding £150,000 and threatening to melt the trophy down for gold. The police got to work trying to find who stole the trophy, and the FA quickly made a replica of the trophy in case the real trophy was never found. The police eventually arranged to meet the ransomers and pay the ransom, but instead of money, they filled a suitcase with old newspapers and met with the ransomers. Before they could get the trophy back, the ransomer ran away and was pursued and caught by the police. But the trophy was still missing until a week later when a man was walking his dog Pickles near his home in South London when suddenly Pickles smelled something and took his owner to a garden hedge where he found a package which he opened to reveal the famous Gilles Rimet trophy wrapped in newspaper. He took the trophy to the police who told him that it didn't look like the World Cup, but after confirming what had happened and realizing that it was indeed the famous trophy, Pickles won Dog of the Year and became famous. England went on to win the World Cup, and England captain Bobby Moore lifted the trophy that had been left wrapped in a newspaper in a garden hedge. That trophy was eventually given to Brazil in 1970 to keep permanently as they'd won it 3 times. But in 1983 it was stolen again, this time from Brazil's Football Confederation building, and it was never recovered.